Hey everyone, welcome to Narrative English. If you enjoy learning English through stories that are fun, vivid, and easy to imagine, you're in the right place. Because stories allow us to learn language naturally. We hear how people speak. We follow situations. We imagine scenes. And today's story is one of the most beloved humorous books ever written in English literature. 3 Men in a Boat by Jerome K. Jerome. But this is not simply a story about a boat trip. It's a story about friendship. About overthinking small problems. About how ordinary people can turn simple situations into unbelievable chaos. And somehow still laugh about it later. So, imagine yourself sitting beside 3 friends as their very unusual journey begins. In this story, 3 perfectly healthy men once convinced themselves they were extremely sick. They believed their liver was failing. Their hearts were weak and nerves were collapsing. So naturally, they decided the best cure was a relaxing vacation. A peaceful boat trip with fresh air and calm water, with no stress. But within a few hours, they could not pack their luggage as they lost their key. They nearly drowned trying to open a can of pineapple. And a small dog started a fight with a kettle. Somehow, this disaster became one of the funniest adventures ever written. This is the story of 3 men in a boat. And hidden inside all the chaos is a surprisingly simple truth about life. As you listen to this story, you'll enjoy a classic piece of English humor while naturally improving your listening skills, learning everyday expressions, and discovering why sometimes the most ridiculous adventures become the happiest memories. The story begins in London. 3 friends are relaxing together in a quiet room. Their names are Jerome, George, and Harris. And they share the room with a dog named Montmorency. Now Montmorency is not an ordinary dog. He believes life is a competition. If something is peaceful, he must disturb it. If someone drops something, he must investigate it. If a fight begins, he must participate. Montmorency is small, but his personality is enormous. Tonight, however, the atmosphere in the room is serious. Very serious. Because the 3 men believe something terrible is happening in their body. It begins when Jerome picks up a medical book. He starts reading casually. At first, it's simply interesting. But after a few pages something strange happens. He begins recognizing every symptom. Headaches, fatigue, dizziness, heart weakness, digestive problems. Jerome becomes convinced he has almost every illness described in the book. Except one. Housemaid's knee. He even feels slightly offended that he does not have that one. Soon George joins the conversation. He complains that he constantly feels tired. Harris declares that his liver must be failing. Within minutes the room feels like a hospital waiting area. 3 perfectly healthy men, completely convinced they are dying. Now pause for a moment. Have you ever searched your symptoms online and suddenly believed you had a serious disease? Exactly. That is exactly what these 3 men are doing. Finally they reach an important conclusion. They need fresh air. They need rest. They need a peaceful vacation. And so they decide on the perfect cure. A relaxing boat trip along the River Thames. The next evening they prepare for their journey. Packing should be simple. But Harris and George confidently announce they will handle everything. Jerome happily agrees to watch. And within minutes, chaos begins. They pack a bag. Then remember something important that should have been placed inside first. So everything comes out again. They repack. Then realize another item is missing. Again, everything comes out. Meanwhile, Montmorency believes the luggage is a playground. He jumps into the bags. He hides socks. He sits proudly on freshly folded clothes. At one point he even steals a toothbrush. Hours pass. The room looks like a battlefield. Finally Harris proudly closes the bag. George wipes sweat from his forehead. Jerome quietly asks one simple question. Where is the toothbrush? The bag opens again. The next morning the 3 friends arrive at the river. For a moment, everything feels perfect. The air smells fresh. The water moves gently. Birds fly above the quiet landscape. They push the boat into the river and begin rowing. At first, the journey feels peaceful. They talk. They laugh. They admire the scenery. But peace rarely lasts long when these three friends are involved. Soon the rowing becomes tiring. Harris believes Jerome is rowing incorrectly. Jerome believes George is rowing too slowly. George believes the other two are doing everything wrong. Meanwhile, Montmorency watches calmly, possibly wondering how these three humans survived adulthood. One evening the friends decide to prepare dinner. They unpack their food supplies: bread, cheese, tea, and a beautiful can of pineapple. Everything seems perfect, until they discover one small problem. They forgot the can opener. At first they laugh. Opening a can cannot be that difficult. Harris tries using a knife. George tries smashing it against the boat. Jerome suggests dropping it on a rock. Nothing works. The pineapple can remains undefeated. Minutes become hours. Three grown men struggle against a small metal container. Finally, Harris throws the pineapple into the river, and the men sit silently, defeated by fruit. Later another problem appears. They need food again, but their food hamper is locked, and the key is missing. The men search everywhere. They check pockets. They check bags. They check the boat. Nothing. Harris becomes convinced the key must somehow be inside the hamper. Jerome argues this is impossible. George suggests the key may have fallen into the river. After long discussion they break the lock. The hamper opens. Inside sits the key. For several seconds nobody speaks. Then Jerome calmly says something very simple. This is exactly the kind of thing that always happens. One evening while preparing tea, Montmorency becomes suspicious of a kettle. He circles around it carefully. He studies it. He growls softly. In his mind, the kettle is clearly dangerous. Finally, Montmorency attacks. He jumps forward and bites the kettle. The kettle does not move. Montmorency jumps back proudly. In his mind he has just defeated a powerful enemy. The three men watch silently, and then they begin laughing. Because Montmorency truly believes he has saved everyone from great danger. One night the friends begin talking about music. Harris suddenly becomes very serious. He explains that he once performed a beautiful musical piece at a party. According to Harris, the audience was deeply emotional. They clapped loudly. They begged him to play again. They demanded several encores. Jerome listens carefully. But in his imagination he sees a slightly different scene. Perhaps the audience was not cheering. Perhaps they were simply asking Harris to stop. Still, nobody interrupts the story. Because sometimes the joy of friendship comes from letting someone enjoy their own imagination. Later in the journey the weather suddenly changes. Dark clouds gather above the river. The wind grows stronger. Rain begins falling heavily. The calm river becomes dangerous. The boat rocks violently. Water splashes inside. For the first time the men stop arguing. George rows harder. Harris steers carefully. Jerome balances the boat. Together they guide the boat toward safety. After a long struggle the storm finally passes. The rain stops. The river becomes calm again. And the three friends sit quietly, grateful to still be dry, mostly. One evening the boat drifts slowly along the river. The sun begins to set. Golden light spreads across the water. For once, nobody argues. Nobody complains. They simply watch the sunset. Jerome begins thinking about the journey. The arguments. The mistakes. The ridiculous situations. And suddenly he realizes something. The trip was not peaceful. But it was unforgettable. Because perfect journeys rarely create good stories. The mistakes do. Near the end of the trip, the friends slowly return to London. The busy city appears again. The quiet river disappears behind them. And Jerome feels something unexpected. A little sadness. Because the journey is ending. Despite all the chaos, the arguments, the pineapple disaster, the missing key, the ridiculous dog, the trip has created something special. Memories. And that is the hidden truth inside this story. We spend so much time trying to make life perfect. But the moments we remember most are rarely perfect. They are messy, unexpected, sometimes even ridiculous. But they are shared with people who make the chaos worthwhile. 3 friends believed they were sick. They planned a relaxing vacation. They struggled to pack. They fought a pineapple can. They lost a key inside a locked box. They survived a storm. And they discovered something simple. That is, sometimes the most imperfect journeys create the best memories. If you enjoyed listening to this story and felt your English becoming easier to understand, keep exploring stories like this. Stories help language feel natural. And they remind us that learning can be enjoyable. And in the next story, we will explore an unforgettable motivational story. A story about a man whose curiosity leads him into a journey far stranger than he ever expected. And the ending of that story might surprise you.